Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 45. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, on X, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt highlighted the Atlantic's change in language surrounding the Signal group chat leak. The magazine refers to the content as attack plans instead of war plans. And Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testified that there is no sensitive information leaked in the chat.
Director Gabbard, were there any sources described in the Signal chat?
No, Congressman.
Were there any methods described in the Signal chat?
No.
Were there any locations?
No.
Therefore, due to the fact that there were no sources, no methods, nor locations described in the Signal chat, it does not make the discussion classified. Is that correct?
That is up to the Secretary of Defense determination.
Earlier today, NPR and PBS were forced to defend their rights to taxpayer money before the House DOGE Subcommittee. NPR CEO Catherine Mayer admitted NPR made a mistake in the lack of coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop story.
First of all, I do want to say that NPR acknowledges that we were mistaken in failing to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story more aggressively and sooner. Our current editorial leadership.
Wuhan?
We recognize that we were reporting at the time, but we acknowledge that the new CIA evidence is worthy of coverage and have covered it.
And Mayer was much more tight-lipped when Congressman Brandon Gill exposed some of NPR's more outrageous pieces.
A few years ago, NPR educated America about, quote, the whole community of genderqueer dinosaur enthusiasts. Do you think that that's an appropriate use of tax dollars?
I was not at NPR at the time, sir.
That's not the question, though. Do you think that that's an appropriate use of our tax dollars?
I think our tax dollars that we use are to be able to provide a wide range of
I'll take that as a yes. You do believe that that's appropriate. Your health advisor at NPR also stated in an interview that, quote, fear of fatness is more harmful than actual fat.
It's going to be the quote of the week for me. Marty, Makary, and Bhattacharya were confirmed for the Senate as FDA commissioner and NIH director, respectively. And the vote for party lines there for Bhattacharya, while Makary he gained support from 3 Democrats in addition to all of the Republicans. Yesterday, Donald Trump signed an executive order to increase proof of citizen requirements for voter registration. The order instructs the Election Assistance Commission to require that documents that provide citizenship, and they'll withhold funding from states that don't enforce the requirement to use the federal registration form. Trump spoke out for the order during the appearance on The Vince Show.
Do you think places like California, where they've got legalized ballot harvesting, will actually comply here?
Well, I think they have to, otherwise we'll hold back funds. And we did a lot of things yesterday having to do with elections, and that's long overdue.
Yeah.
And elections have been rigged at a level like you've never seen before. You know that. I think you're a believer in that. But anybody smart is a believer in that. But they've been rigged at levels that nobody has ever seen before. And
Donald Trump also updated the public that he is still very interested in Greenland. Watch.
We need Greenland for international safety and security. We need it. We have to have it.
Well, let's bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson. So, MP, when I look at this, to actually go through entire performance of, in this case, states, but to the outcomes that we want and all of the federal funding involved in it, it's weird, like those things should go together more often than they do, but we don't look at the scoreboard or the receipts as often as we should.
Yeah, but this is the new right. I mean, this is the new right. It's a new era. It's a new golden age where, no, we're going to do exactly that. I mean, we're going to tie performance to the right metrics. I mean, this is not rocket science. It's not very hard. We've been talking about this for a while in different ways, what we've been saying about education, right? The other day with Donald's. This is not difficult. It just requires the political will to actually get things done. We keep watching this Signal story with The Atlantic and how it's been evolving over the last few days. The fact that they now call it attack plans instead, changing the language is big on the left. So the fact that they're doing that signals what in your mind? Signals. Well, it does signal that they see this as a time to pounce. I mean, Democrats pounce. That's what's going on now. And look, I mean, I don't think that you think that most people don't care about the details of the story and the weeds, but I do think there's some legs to this story just because people are shocked and appalled that that sensitive information or sensitive discussion is occurring on Signal. I think most regular people don't know that, and then B, that obviously you have an enemy journalist in there that terrifies people for good reason, right? On the other hand, I think the reality is this wasn't as bad as they're making it out to be, of course, and there's some real issues with communication. There's reasons you might want to use Signal, but is Signal safe? We're going to talk about that later today with Jason Buttrill. Doubtful. So it's a complicated issue, and it's not gonna go away. I do think that the administration needs to come out and say, again and again, a few more times, like, look, we're looking into making sure this doesn't happen again. It's not acceptable, and then move on.
Is there anyone on Capitol Hill that is more quotable than our guy, Congressman Brandon Gill?
No, Brandon Gill is slaughtering it right now. He's mass murdering it. He's really doing an incredible job, and he just doesn't care. He's out there saying what he thinks in a great way. He's belligerent. He just moves forward, and I see a bright future for him if he can combine that with actually getting some stuff done on the Hill, which I think he's working on as well. That'd be amazing.
You mentioned Jason Buttrill. He will join us next because he'll tell us, did we learn anything from the JFK files? Stay with us. Well, there's tariff wars, recession fears, and all about stubborn inflation right now. So there's no wonder that gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. We have volatile markets like right now, so don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. Be sure to take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. So is it time for you to hedge against economic inflation and instability with gold? Learn how to get that physical gold in a tax-sheltered account by texting Jill to the number 989898, and Birch Gold will send you a free, no obligation info kit. Again, it's my name, Jill, to the number 989898. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, so you can trust Birch Gold to protect your savings with gold. And it took us decades to get into this tangled mess, and they're trying to all unpack it right now. So how long is it going to take to get out of it? And what will that cost be? Text Jill to 989898 today. Last week, the Trump administration released tens of thousands of pages of documents related to the assassination of JFK. Jason Buttrill, he's Glenn Beck's head writer and researcher. He's a Marine. He's a former intelligence analyst for the Department of Defense. And he's had the wonderful job of combing through all of those files. And he joins us now to break down what he's found, because you are the one who drew the short straw. You got to go through everything and figure out. So what did you find in the JFK files?
I think even the JFK researcher nerds out there that have been on this since 63, really, they would all pretty much admit that there wasn't a ton of new smoking gun revelations from this. So if you were looking for the who in this, who pulled the trigger, and anything not pertaining to Oswald,
we all were.
Yeah, we all
wanted to just say this person is the one who did it.
Right. You were a little disappointed, but I do, but kind of a little bit for I guess kind of moving into my larger point here. We fed all of those tens of thousands of documents into artificial intelligence, and it was all the new release. We also fed in, it pulled in from the Warren Commission as well, all the other previous releases. And I asked it, I said, just recalibrate, rethink this. Who was, responsible for killing JFK? And it actually came through with 6 to 8 possibilities. And so it numbered them from 1 to 8, 1 being the most high, 8 being probably it's just a wild theory, basically. Number 1, as you would assume, because it's pulling from the Warren Commission as well, was Lee Harvey Oswald. It gave it a high probability, 80 to 100% or whatever. But number 2 that popped up now after analyzing everything was, and this was moderate to high probability, just a few percentage points off of Oswald, was rogue CIA elements. And I was like, huh. And so I focused heavily on how the hell was it pulling that information, giving it such a high probability off of some of this new information. Because even if I'm in the CIA and they've been blocking this information for decades, even if it's not true, I don't want this information getting out, and I'm going to try to block it because there's something in those docs that are revealing some pretty shady activity that we were up to. And yeah, I found a lot of shady activity that they were up to in the 1960s.
So this is what's crazy about everything CIA related, and why it's great that the conspiracy theory epithet is not negative anymore. We all know the conspiracy theories are actually true a lot of the time. We see we've been lied to, but it's been decades of this where I'll just be personal about it for a minute. When I go through this, my rational brain is like, well, I'm going to falsify this, and this claim. This sounds like a conspiracy theory. But there's a number of crazy ass things that the government has done, right? Where you just sit there and go, no, that actually happened.
Yeah.
I need to remember this, right? Because this actually happened. They actually did this.
Yeah.
And that's been going on over the years for a while. So maybe the good thing about these files is that they help, I guess what you're saying is, they help us see that the CIA has been doing and the government's been doing some naughty things for a very long time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if this is why this is so crucial, and I think the biggest thing I took from researching all this is there is a pattern of behavior with our creepiest, biggest spy agency, the CIA. It goes all the way back to the 60s, and they did not let us ask questions or look at some of this stuff because they don't want us to know about all these conspiracy theories. For one, and I'll just rattle off a few of them. The CIA is not supposed to operate on United States soil. They're supposed to turn that stuff over to the FBI. They'll use gray area to try and get around it. Right. But we found that the CIA is all but bragging about in their memos that we were looking through about how they infiltrated U.S. media. Infiltrated U.S. media, including leveraged the specific journalists that they infiltrated and kind of converted, I guess, onto their side, all of their contacts. Some of those contacts, they were just naming out. One was at the New York Times. One was a contact that had a direct line to then Attorney General RFK. So now you're basically saying that, yeah, we were spying on RFK through this media contact that this, asset of ours now trusted. Now, we know that, just look at today, every time you see in the New York Times or Washington Post, oh, we have unnamed sources that, that we're reporting on this, and it just so happens to go along with our smear of, Donald Trump or something like that. See, we told you so. Well, we know there's a pattern of behavior that the CIA has infiltrated, and how did they describe it? Narrative manipulation or something like that is how they described it. Our own CIA is doing this to the American public. Another example. I was reading through something. It was something else, something not related. And then I skipped down like a couple of paragraphs, and they just casually just let it slip that they had Barry Goldwater under CIA surveillance, which I had heard before that he was under FBI surveillance. This is the CIA. Barry Goldwater when he was running for president. Now, if you don't let anybody know about this, you don't let the public know about this for 60 years, then you would be willing to accept them to surveil and manipulate a candidate for president, let's say in 2016, and his name is Donald Trump. And we just hardly bat our eyes over it. It just goes away. This is why it's so important to know these things.
Yeah, and if you watch BlazeTV, you know that Glenn always has his Wednesday night special. This is actually the topic of his special tonight. So, Jason, you guys were in there. So I look at these JFK files. So many have been released already. Do we expect any more info? Do we have all the info that we think we're going to get now released?
I don't think that, maybe they've gotten to 80,000, I think is what he said, that the full release. I tell you what, I can't even count anymore after I was adding them up and we were like 20 something thousand documents feeding all this stuff into like our program, and I lost count. Just by looking at the stuff that we've seen right now, I really don't think we're going to get anything as far as if you're going to classify it like smoking gun that's going to really change the narrative up. I really do hope that they continue to release more, though, because it's all this extra stuff that is the most juicy to me. All this extra stuff that we never even intended to, learn about, like, JFK's, there's no other way to describe it. He was at war with the Central Intelligence Agency, and they were pushing back at war against him. There's just no other way to describe it but that. And the things that the CIA was willing to do as the president's part of his cabinet, basically, like they work for him, what they were willing to do back at him is absolutely frightening to today. Look at any news, story today. Anything that just kind of seems off on you, anytime where they tell you don't ask questions about that, don't follow it, just take the initial narrative, and by all means, do not follow money if there's any, crazy implications. Just accept our word for it. No, because way too many of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. And that's exactly how they shut you down. And that's how they've shut us down for anything revolving the CIA and JFK for the past 60 years. That's how they've silenced us.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the deep state, right, post-World War II has become incredibly dangerous and has been dangerous for a while. And people are, I hope, waking up to that fact because of this. I want to throw something else at you that I think about often now when it comes to media. So I believe that the reason that people thought in the past that we had an objective media and it was a very prestigious profession and journalism, et cetera, is in part because the organizations like the CIA, right, powerful government agencies, felt as if it was under control. In other words, that enabled, right, there wouldn't be that much truth to power when you have 3 stations and, very little, there's centralized TV. And that comes out and just all of a sudden in 10 years is in everyone's home. And then you have these kinds of connections at these papers going back to the 1950s. Post-World War II, you have intelligence agencies in America infiltrating them. So, of course you think everything is great and it's a staid profession, right? And it's professional because there's not as much controversy as there should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I think it's very obvious how the CIA views U.S. media, and they view it as a weapon. They've used it as a weapon, let's say like Radio Free Europe and Asia. They've used it overseas, but as we've revealed in the JFK files, they used it as a weapon against our own with people. And I actually think it was harder back then for them to manipulate U.S. media, to infiltrate it and to use it against us. I think it was harder back then. The reason I say that is because the way the media has evolved now, there's probably, I wish I could remember this graphic right off the top of my head. There's probably you could fit it into, it's on one finger or one or two hands, like 5 to 8 people in organizations that control all mass media. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking print, cable, internet, everything. It's a small amount that actually control all of our media, and that's going into radio, everything. So now they just have to get leverage on that small group of people, and they control everything. And you see that today. Like all of them run in the same direction all the time. And not only that, they'll quote their buddies that have the same opinions that they do as absolute facts. So they'll say, oh yeah, as per the New York Times, this will be the Washington Post, as per the New York Times, they say that Trump, was peeing on hookers in Russia. Case closed, everyone believes it. Okay. And everyone runs in that direction. It's so funny. I remember doing it was another TV special that we did, and we were trying to show all the narratives running on Ukraine. And I was like, where did they get this quote? Where'd it happen? You would follow it from one outlet, they would attribute to the next outlet, they would attribute to the next outlet, and it would show up like in Bloomberg or something from some guy that just heard from Doug the plumber. You know what I mean? In Kiev. It was the most ridiculous attribution, step by step that I've ever seen. But if you have a landscape like that, it's so much easier for them to control. And now, I think that they believe they have a stranglehold on it, and it's really we're outliers that are really some of the only ones that are trying to tell the real truth.
We are outliers, but if you start putting pieces together, and you were talking about AI and putting the documents into there, if this is a fight against the deep state and you're going to need all the help you can get, yeah, of course they have it too. But now on our side, we can go through and put documents in and get things done much faster as well. So how do you see that as a tool to fight against all the corruption out there?
I think technology has changed the name of the game a lot. Even you can have a random creator on YouTube or X that can mimic an entire TV studio, and can put on his own, show or whatever, and tell the truth based off of how he sees it. Artificial intelligence is making it to where you're taking something that used to be like an elite level, position, like a news agency, the chief researcher. Not that that's my title or anything. People would be like, whoa, I don't feel like I don't feel like that, I have the credentials to handle that job. Well, no, you can. You really can. You can use things like artificial intelligence and do your own homework. For far too long, elitists like corporate media, government, academia, they've held on to these things because they're the experts. They're the technocracy, right? So they're the ones that interpret what's happening in government or interpret what's happening within, the intelligence community or whatever, because they're so smart. You don't have the means to go and find that information because we are the gatekeepers of it. No longer.
Yeah, that's it is a good thing, but that's why the war continues over the media. That's why they oppose any alternative. But it is interesting to see that stranglehold. It's almost like what they control is less and less powerful, right? As people realize these sorts of facts. So it sounds like what you're saying about JFK is something like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is this right? Is the CIA, it's not clear whether the CIA killed Kennedy or not, but we shouldn't be surprised if they did.
Right. Well, I mean, I remember we did a chalkboard for Glenn, and I was just looking through it, and when I was first drawing it up, and I was like, well, did the CIA, based off of that like probability rating that artificial intelligence is giving it, I was like, well, did they have motive? So I made a section for motive. Did they have the beef, with Kennedy? Did they have the capability? Were they out of control? What are some of the things they were doing? And then finally, did they have the connections? Looking at all of those. Yes, and yes, they did. And the beef with Kennedy, that was very eye-opening, but the capability and just how out of control they were was probably the most shocking thing that I saw. If they're capable of doing all of those things, they've been hiding it for so long, they're still doing it. I guess the scariest thing is now, looking at, a 60-year-old case is how worse is it now? Like, what are they doing now? Because it hasn't stopped. If you look at the Trump, the 2016-17 Trump, I mean, they clearly didn't stop there. They're still running crazy. So what the hell's happening right now?
Well, let's take a look at what's happening this week with the Atlantic story, with the Signal Group, everything that's going on. What do you make of just this news story and how people are framing it?
Personally, it's a total CIA op. I'll just come out and say it.
Is this the JFK files?
It's totally the JFK, yeah.
Did you just read 80,000 pages?
Right. I've been in it. I've had my tinfoil hat on nonstop. I won't even take it off for dinner. I'm just like, no, I see some crazy things that actually remind me of looking at those, docs from the 1960s in this. You talk about, okay, so let me start with timeline. This story comes out the day before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence with Tulsi Gabbard. They said to have those hearings the day before. Now that's fortuitous timing for them. The day before the hearing, they have it. They have the hearing. CIA Director Ratcliffe says, "Look, I don't know. The very first thing that happened after my confirmation went through in the Senate, I had these texts come in and they're uploading Signal onto all my devices and computer." That's interesting. He didn't ask for it. That's just protocol. So they did it. You've got Tulsi Gabbard testifying. I think this was in front of the House. That this is something that CISA mandated. And it's on basically every government device. Everyone that's government, immediately this gets installed on their device. Why is the government so married to Signal? Why is our intelligence community so willing to sign off on it? It makes absolutely no sense. Until you start doing your own homework on these things. If you follow the money, you find out that Signal, when it was originally established, was getting millions of dollars from a government organization that has ties, actually right underneath, part of Radio Free Asia. Radio Free Asia. You might be saying, hey, wait a minute. Wasn't that an old Cold War tool used by the CIA? Yes, Jill, it actually freaking was. That's exactly what it was. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Am I not supposed to draw that conclusion? Am I not supposed to follow the money on that? Because that sounds very, very dirty to me. I don't know.
So I've had this debate, as I was saying off air, with a lot of people in tech over the years, because I don't trust any of these companies. And I basically think like someone can break into anything. And really everyone should assume, there's very few things that are secure when it comes to human communication in general, right? Mm-hmm. But their argument would be, well, look, the government was involved in a lot of encryption companies, right, in the beginning, because they wanted to use it in other countries to foment revolutions and, all the great things that we've done throughout the world for our sacred democracy. So sometimes they used it for good, sometimes not. But then the attitude is like, but then that just started it. And then it kind of took off into a private company where everything's fine. And then they always say that the technology with Signal is better, than a lot of other outfits. Now, I don't fully buy this. I can see you looking at me. Yes, Matt, that sounds very convincing.
I was just waiting to retort.
But I do believe that Signal is held up as this thing that can be trusted as opposed to everything else. But I think we already know that isn't the case, right?
Oh, I mean, exactly. I mean, it's been held up, even though WikiLeaks has already published Vault 7, which was CIA tools used to penetrate Signal as well as WhatsApp. Okay, so this was before. Now, the Biden administration's mandate through CISA and the IC was to no, it's all fine. Put all of these on our government devices because they're completely secure. Well, that flies against the classified information that was released through WikiLeaks. Then we also hear about Tucker Carlson. He said specifically he did not tell anybody, including his wife, that he was trying to set up an interview with Vladimir Putin, but the NSA hacked his signal and knew the exact signal messages that he sent. I don't know. It's very, very fishy, and it seems like, to me, okay, take this. I got one more thing. Did you see Mike Waltz's response on, I think it was NBC, like a day or so ago? They were asking him about this. And at first they were like, hey, was it a staffer? Well, was it just a mistake? Because every conservative now is saying, hey, it's a mistake. Let's move on, admit your mistake and move on. Mike Waltz said specifically that someone had changed the number and the contact, and that he's not sure how it happened, whether it was deliberately on the journalist side or by some other, quote, technical mean. Now, what the hell does that mean? Like, that doesn't happen. That's like I'm trying to text, Matt something, a hilarious, dirty joke, but someone changed the number and contact, and I sent it to Jill. Now I'm in trouble with HR.
That's right.
But that doesn't happen. Somebody like our tech nerds went into my phone and did that, so I would get in trouble. That's like something, that's kind of what you're talking about. Now, who would have the means to do that except the organization that has funding ties to Signal? A history of regime change through organizations like Radio Free Europe and Asia? I don't know.
Listen, what I'm learning here is everybody is going to need to get their tinfoil hats on along with Buttrill tonight, because Glenn's special on JFK Files it sounds incredible to me. I know I'll be watching it later. Jason?
I've got spare tinfoil hats if anyone needs them.
Many to go around. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Chris Bedford will explain why Democrats took all the wrong lessons from 2024. Coming up. Earlier this week, the Democrats decided to take a look back at what the heck went wrong for the 2024 election, and the results highlighted everything that went wrong. But guess what? They didn't propose any solutions. So how will the party adapt for the next election? Well, let's bring in Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford, because he wrote about this in his latest Beltway brief. So Bedford, what did they uncover this time around when they actually took a long, hard look in the mirror?
They had some of their top data scientists at one of their outside firms take a look, led by David Shore, who you might have seen his interviews over the last week as they got ready to release this report. And they interviewed over 8 million people, multiple times per person, and they came to the conclusion that things were even more dire than Democrats had hoped. Now, we'd heard this kind of coping from Democrats that the problem is their voters just stayed in the couch. But that's not the problem. The problem is that between 2016 and 2024, for example, moderate Hispanics who self-identify as moderate, swung 24 points towards the Republicans. The numbers were high for liberal Hispanics who qualified as liberal, called themselves liberal as well. Amongst black voters, the numbers weren't that high, but they were the first really noticeable shift that Democrats have had to deal with since in modern times, essentially. This is a reckoning. And previously, there's been a couple things that Democrats have always, and Republicans have taken for granted, which is that the more people you register, the better Democrats do. You got to get those voters who aren't typically politically engaged, and they'll vote for the liberal candidate if you can get them to the polls. Now, we heard rumors during the 2024 election that there were Democrats were starting to pull back from this strategy because they were finding out that they were registering more people than they expected to vote for Donald Trump than Kamala Harris. And it looks like, according to David Shore, that if everyone in this country had voted, if they just actually done what they always talked about, a universal registration, then Donald Trump would have won the national vote by 5 points. It would have made it worse for Democrats. So the strategies they have pursued in the past, especially in the last 12 years or so, just aren't working. In fact, they're hindering and hurting Democrats. Now, there's a lot of information there about where they're going wrong, the different things that they have been pushing and preaching, and how they're not actually having any real good impact with the voters that they expect. But they're not reacting to it that way. I mean, some of the folks, the more intelligent folks maybe, like Chuck Schumer, are out there now just trying on a mea culpa tour, trying to say, I'm so sorry, look at my progressive bona fides, look how much I'm actually willing to fight on this sort of thing. Some of the other ones, like Gavin Newsom and Shapiro and Fetterman, are trying to tack more to the center. But by far, the loudest voices in the room are the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, who are going out in these rallies, doubling and tripling down on the different policies that, well, we saw this swing over the last couple of years. Now, you got to keep in mind, they always try to act like they're in the opposition, these progressives. But they've essentially been in charge since 2008 with the 4-year blip of Donald Trump. They had 12 years in the White House to prove their mettle, and the American people have thoroughly rejected what they've said. The corporations have rejected what they're saying. The tech companies have rejected what they're saying. So when you look at these charts, the number one takeaway is, listen, guys, if you're a Democrat, I have to grow the slice of our pie. Our slice of the electoral pie is the most politically engaged across across the entire country. The people who care the most about politics vote for us. But we've already got them. They're already coming out and voting. And now you got these progressives out there, as opposed to trying to grow that pie, they're just trying to shove more sugar into their little narrow slice to completely overload it, give it diabetes. And that's not a strategy that's actually going to see them out of the wilderness anytime soon.
It is unbelievable to me that there is another group that was completely wrong this entire time about how to actually win and defeat the Democrats. And that is the Republicans, who were the experts who told us how to win for many years and failed for years. And it took Donald J. Trump to do this. And now we see this definitive win. But I want to talk about some of those people in charge. I want to talk about those progressives. I want to talk about a certain representative who is beyond retarded. A certain representative who is near and dear to everyone's hearts. A certain representative who is really making waves with her clownish performances. And that is someone who conservative media right now can't stay away from for good reason. Representative Jasmine Crockett, who is under fire for saying that Senator Ted Cruz, quote, has to be knocked over the head like hard.
I think that you punch. I think you punch. I think you're okay with you okay with punching. You know, I think, and I love Colin, and I think towards the end he started to punch a little harder. But like, it's Ted Cruz. I mean, like, this dude has to be knocked over the head like hard, right? Like, there is no niceties with him, like at all. Like you go clean off on him, right?
Chris, at the risk of destroying your brain cells and mine, please comment on that video.
It's truly incredible. And she is someone who has absolutely glommed to the camera with a message that I don't know exactly who is that appealing to, other than people who maybe are already entirely in agreement with her. I actually think it's funny. I think it's great. I mean, if you see other clips from that same interview, they asked her, well, what legislation do you have pending? What are you trying to work on? And she said she has no legislation pending. She has nothing that she's trying to work on. Quote, I'm not going to lie.
That's preferred. That's preferred. I'm not going to lie. That's preferred.
And she says, well, what chances does it have of success? Well, okay, I get it. But your job is to be there to legislate, not to be just a TikTok influencer who talks smack from the interview chair about beating up Ted Cruz. It doesn't make any sense. It's deeply stupid. And I feel like you're totally right, Matt. I've been assigning an article about her probably once a day because she is on an absolute media blitz. So if you're someone who's actually interested in trying to change the way the party's fortunes have been going, If you're a Democrat who's actually interested in trying to shift the focus of the party back to the roots that made it dominant force of the 20th century in American politics, well, you're sitting there thinking, I can't get any air in. These people are taking over. These different progressive politicians are sucking all of the air out of the room. And it kind of reminds me of in 2016 on the campaign trail. All these Republicans are out there, and they had their talking points, and they never pointed at you. They always just used their thumb, because that's what the focus group said was non-threatening when they were trying to make a point. And they would go out and give the same speech over and over again, and they couldn't understand why they were getting zero coverage. And then Donald Trump would go out there, and he'd say something new every single time. He'd say something that the liberals thought was stupid. He'd say things that the Republicans thought were stupid, but he said things that the base was actually interested in. That was a totally different strategy. He sucked the oxygen out of the room for those Republicans. Unfortunately for the Democrats, the people who are taking up all the oxygen have nothing smart to say.
Bedford, in the last 60 seconds that we have you, because you are our politics editor, we ask everybody coming up next, by the way, how to improve Congress. So I want to get your suggestions, since you're there on Capitol Hill and have to deal with this all the time.
Oh, there's a couple different ways. Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems with Congress right now is a problem that America is dealing with in general, and you can't really fix it. It's just the mass media. The stuff that we're doing right now, the internet, the constant news cycle, it makes it so that they're always in a fundraising pitch. They're not actually interested in governing. I think one of the ways that you actually have to do that is to increase the talent pool. This is not always popular to hear in conservative circles, but I think they need to raise the salaries of the staff. They need to get more experienced people in there. They need to get people who are actually willing to do battle, people who don't stay there until their late 20s, early 30s, and then change out and get a big job with a lot more money. People who are interested in coming to D.C. to actually make an impact. I mean, heck, I would personally love it if you could make their terms just a little bit longer, so congressmen aren't always constantly in this dumb fundraising cycle with zero interest in governance, and have a staff behind them that's more than just grok and a couple people who answer the phones, who know the systems of this government, know the ideas of the congressman, congresswoman, and want to push it through. And obviously for the Senate, well, bring back state appointments.
I love it. I knew you'd have a good answer there. So, Bedford, we'll catch you again tomorrow. Thanks so much.
See you then.
You just heard from Chris, so we're going to hear from you next. How do you think we should improve Congress? We'll have your suggestions right after this. Well, as we are looking at the golden age and we think that everything is heading in the right direction, we know that Congress is still fundamentally broken. And today's question all came about because Representative Eli Crane put up on X today that Congress is as weak as you think it is. So that made me go look up and say, what is the latest congressional approval numbers? Well, the Gallup poll has found that just 29% of Americans approve of Congress. I think that number is still a little too high. But I wanted to know, how do we fix it, right? So that was the question that I posed to you today. So Harris replies back first. He says, term limits now. Pass a constitutional amendment stating that no one may serve more than 12 years as a member of Congress, whether it's a 6-year term in the House or 6 terms, I should say, in the House, or 2 terms in the Senate, or a combination of the two. In addition, a lifetime ban on them becoming lobbyists. He doesn't like everybody up there on K Street.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I agree. I understand where he's coming from, and a lot of people in our circles do. But the problem is that a lot of people do that, and then they go on and get a big fat job, as Chris Bedford said earlier. So in other words, you'd make it so you'd try to maximize your time there to be successful later on, and you'd probably use your position for that, for the sake of whatever you're going to do next, and go into lobbying and whatever. So I don't think that solves the problem. The other problem is the longer you're there, the more you can learn. I know, like, oh, they're all corrupt, but that's a character problem and a structural problem. The longer you are there, the more you know what you're doing, you know how to get things done. So you do want people, you don't want people in there into their 80s, but you do want at least a cohort of people who've been there a long time. This is what they do. This is how they identify, in terms of prestige and success. They will therefore be adept. They'll be good at their job. So, but I get, I respectfully disagree. I get exactly where Harris is coming from, but I don't think that's going to solve it.
We just have to get more of the good people in there, which is definitely a hard thing to do. Rob replied that make regular order great again, pass individual appropriation bills, and bring back earmarks. He said, I used to think they were bad. They're not.
Yeah, so this is a mentor of mine, Michael Ullman, once said the best way to, here's the problem, lay out the problem first. The problem is that if you're in Congress, part of your job is to bring home the bacon for your district, right? I mean, that's why you love a military base. It provides jobs. People are there. They spend money. Your job is to bring home the bacon to some degree in your district. So here's the problem. Every person in Congress, Republican or Democrat, is going to try to do that, right? And so what are you going to do about it? You're going to say, oh, no, we won't let you do this because we used to have earmarks, which means you write a little part of the bill and say, oh, and also this military base is going to come to my hometown. And we're going to give $50 million to the research center at the university in my district, right? And you just write these in separate. And the conservatives used to complain because you'd say, this is all wasted money. But guess what happens when you don't allow them? Now we just have one big primordial soup of a mess, right? Where it's all just raiding the Treasury. So a mentor of mine, Michael Ullman, with much experience on this, said, what we should do is just give them a cap. Like, in other words, give each member of Congress, X millions of dollars. You can use this for pork, right? You can use this for your district because you know that they're going to do it. So I understand where Rob's coming from. There's definitely some truth to that.
And Caleb has potentially one of the more interesting ways to go about this. He says, force every member of Congress to live stream their entire workday, 24/7, no edits, no excuses. Every backroom deal, every lobbyist lunch, every time they dodge a vote or nap through a hearing, blast it all on X for the world to see. Now, I do know that there are some members of Congress that are putting more and more out on social media, right? If you look, I think Anna Paulina Luna was out there. There was about a 5.5-minute video that she put out of just kind of her day coming back in for the 119th Congress. They are putting more out on social media, but he wants to take this to a whole new level.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's certainly some truth to this as well. I mean, he says every lobbyist lunch. I mean, we need to have transparency on interactions, especially monetary, right, transactions in Congress. I would, since I'm in a disagreeable mood today, and I'm going to disagree with my own lovely audience, I would say the one place where you don't actually want transparency is you do want people to have the ability to make deals with each other over bills. If they're actually legislating, you want them to have private conversations. Sort of like the Supreme Court, you do want the people to be able to disagree without it being public. Because here's the one problem with your theory, Caleb. The one thing I would disagree with is if you 24/7 live stream a member of Congress, a lot of them will like that. They're sick people. And they will make it a 24/7 reality show about themselves. So there's some privacy is needed to actually do good. You can have great arguments and discussions you wouldn't have otherwise when it's a show. But certainly we do need more transparency, and I would agree with him there.
Don't give the narcissist another reason to go through and say, look at me, even more than they already do.
Some people in Congress would like nothing more. They'd want this more than anything in the world. It's 24/7 camera coverage.
It's Hollywood for ugly people. That's what they know it as. It's a trope for a reason. But take us away with some technology, because there is so much in that sector that we still need to break down.
Yeah, well, first I want to shout out to Mr. Ted Silberstein, who his answer on this was televised group calisthenics before each session. And then he also said maybe an obstacle course with live alligators. A classic that my 5-year-old and I would enjoy watching. I think that was a good comment. Technology is coming up over and over again. It's behind almost every single story that we talk about. It shapes the entire structure of the world in which we live. For a long time, I think people on the right, particularly intellectuals, didn't take it seriously enough. We think it's like this neutral thing we can just use or not. And, a new product came out, and that's great. And maybe the market will pick it up and use it, or maybe we won't. The problem is that technology shapes the very structure of our lives and shapes the very structure of our relationships and our governance. It changes the way that we think about the world. So, if you have books and then the book comes out, which was a form of technology, you go, you know what? The whole world, all of nature is like a book. written by the creator. The computer comes out and it's like we live in a simulation. We get our ideas right from the technology we use, and it shapes the world we live in a very complicated way, in a way that we don't see. TV comes out, and it's the worst thing in the world. Everyone watches it all of a sudden. Then the internet comes out. It's the worst thing in the world. We notice the new one, but we don't notice the old one. It's the water in which we breathe. Famous guy Marshall McLuhan used to talk about this. Very interesting media theorist. How does that apply to today? It applies in spades to today. It applies to today on this show when we were talking about Signal and the chats and the deliberation of the highest members in our government about this attack that's now all over the news. Think about what the different factors here. I'm not going to give any answers or solutions, but just think about the bullet points. Is it a good thing? We'll put it out as a question. Is it a good thing for cabinet members to be talking in a Signal chat at all? A friend of mine called today and said they shouldn't be doing this at all. They should be talking in person. It's an important conversation where they all have to come together, even though if it's a pain in the ass. And if you're not there, too bad. Should they be talking about this on the phone? What means should they use to deliberate, right, and argue about what ought to be done? And how does the technology they use change the nature of what they're saying to each other, right? Because if you're on a chat all day, right, you can just go back and forth all day. You have to come to a meeting, you got to plan what you're going to say, and you kind of got to bang it out right there. You got to come to a conclusion, right? But on the other hand, the chat is super convenient, and you can go back and forth in a way that's right there no matter where you are. So in terms of instant communication, it works really well. But this is a big problem for governance and in any country, and it's an eternal problem figuring out what technology ought to be used to communicate when and where. But I'm telling you, the technology it always dictates the kind of conversation we have, and you can see that debate raging here. And look, this isn't about Republican versus Democrat. This is just a real question about how we should be communicating and using technology at the highest level.
Well, and then Bedford today was saying, we need to pay staffers more so they don't just throw everything into Grok. And Jason Buttrill was here going, we are actually just throwing all of the documents for the JFK files into AI. Okay, but who owns this? Who can have access to that technology? Because you would think a lot of the government stuff is actually going to be floating around in there. So how much do we trust it? With this is the latest of the technological advances. Oh yeah, so the AI is incredible. It is an incredible tool, and you can see that the more that time goes on, the more stuff just does become public, right? So you get to this point at what point here's the first rule, though. I'll just cut to the chase. It's the end of the show. The first rule to teach your kids and internalize in your own mind is anything you do on the internet on this is public. This is a box. If you type into the box, there are people watching you, and that is something you need to drill into your head. Sometimes it's good to have a very boring life and nothing going on, and then it doesn't matter what's going into a Signal group chat or not. Thanks for watching the show, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow night to break it all down. I reject that. Always exciting lives here. Exciting lives here.